Well, you've got years, haven't you? Say, Doug, the podcaster. Ha ha ha. It's Toby Hadoke here, accentuating the positive and being silly as I enjoy watching a Doctor Who episode chosen by a friend of mine. I have to watch, observe and comment and try and pick what I think their favourite thing about the episode might be.
Hi, I'm Rueben. I'm a Doctor Who fan. I'm picking The Green Death. It's the beginning of the end of the Unit family era and such a sweet goodbye to Joe Grant.
What's the colour of death? Don't tell me that you think it's red. Me, I know it's green. Well, there we go. And actually, that does apply to money, which the song was about as well. So listen, here we are. It's episode 4 of The Green Death. What does it say on BritBox? Unit Cliff and Joe work to find a way to destroy the green maggots. The Doctor, having infiltrated Global Chemicals to investigate further, makes his way to a computer room. There, the computer... I'm not going to read any further because I would have to press a button, and I don't want to do that. And it feels like it's going to give away the end of the episode, if my memory serves correctly. Now, excuse the yawn. I've had a long week or so. It's been over a week since I saw part 3, so I'm going to try not to repeat myself. But we are in classic 70s, certainly classic Third Doctor mode here. The Unit family are all about to come together because we're about to meet Mike Yates and Sergeant Benton, who've thus far not been in the story, for a last hurrah of the Unit family, which has already lost Roger Delgado, who played the Master. So let's see what The Green Death Part 4 has to offer. And my guest Rueben Herfindahl will give the American perspective and his own unique perspective on his favourite thing at the end of the episode. So here we go. Part 4 of The Green Death, engaging the positive, and we will watch from the beginning in 3, 2, 1. So this... I had this in not bad quality. My bootleg version of this was one of those ones I got from a shop called The Place in Wolverhampton, where I'd go with 2 VHSs and I'd return a few weeks later and get one back full of episodes. And the Pertwees were from Australia and were pretty much first generation or off air. I don't know if he'd had them taped off air and then sent over because they had the same... They had VHS as well, didn't they? So I had very good quality copy of The Green Death. I've never had to watch it, through fuggy phosphorescence. It's I like the glow of the fire on Joe there. That very much reminds me of, because I lived in an old house in the middle of the countryside, and it's too expensive to heat with central heating and stuff. We had log fires that we crowded around. So this very much reminds me, what Joe is doing now is very much how I experience these episodes. That maggot looks not too bad. It's slightly glowing, slightly whiter, isn't it? Because it's in a different light as you do. Hink squashed his nose against the glass there. So he's got no lines, having looked like he's going to be quite an interesting character, and having a little bit more sort of laid back charisma than your average sort of henchman. I always think he looks like he's got cotton wool in his cheeks there. I don't know if that's just something peculiar to him, but yeah, in the book he's a sort of, he's a comic book reading, slightly sort of. Is the suggestion that he has learning difficulties? I think so. He's certainly there's that kind of suggestion about him. But I got it such a long time since I read any of those. I do remember Boss sort of being, one world, one something, one boss. He's a bit. It's all a bit, gets all a bit fascistic. And yeah. Oh, there's Nancy Mitzi Mackenzie, who is one of the few people who have been in Doctor Who under 2 different names, because she is Mitzi Webster in Colony and Space. Same person has changed her surname, because normally actors, whether they get married or divorced or whatever, tend to sort of keep their same name professionally. But no, Mitzi Webster, Mitzi McKenzie, there are a few others. Simon Day and Simon Paisley Day are the same people. Did he just say, come on, Dix? I think he did, yeah. There's a Dix and a Betts, isn't there? So that's quite nice. I suppose you could sort of say perhaps the era is getting a little self-indulgent now, but that's okay. I like, yes. Oh, it's lovely. It's the grumpy milkman again. I like an educated man, you see. I've got eyes, haven't I? Yeah. Yes, I do like the milkman. I think he's a really good character. I really like the milkman. I wonder if he might end up actually being my favourite thing. It's a very small part, doesn't even have a name, but he's got attitude. He's funny, and he's a bit sort of surly. I quite like grumpy characters in Doctor Who. It sort of cuts through the sort of ludicrousness in a way, you know, to have somebody that's just a bloke doing his job and being really pissed off with just the mundanity of life. I like that. It's a good counterpoint to all the sort of all the highfalutin stuff and all the science. I like the way this scene started, shot through all the apparatus as well. That's another sort of trademark of this story that I not really picked up on before, but watching it this time, I've noticed Michael Bryant's done that a few times. He's very blue. I mean, Terence Dix's assertion that John Pertwee got more bouffant is, as his era went by, is quite true. He also went slightly sort of bluer, purplier, slightly more sort of flamboyant. His colour scheme got a bit more dandified, I would say. I mean, he always had the velvet jackets, didn't he? But there seems to be something a bit more sort of startling about bluey purple. The rust-coloured one I see as less camp. I don't know. I mean, it's a gradation, isn't it, of how camp is your velvet jacket and your frilly shirt. But it seems to me it does get a bit less gritty. Although this velvet, is that a different one than he was wearing before? Because it's sort of darker with a slightly red piping. I rather like that one. I do like a scientific charlatan. I do like Jerome Willis. I think he's excellent. More calumnies, more lies. He's got some good dialogue flying about here. And what you need of a villain like this is to be playing it, you know, totally like it's not children's tea time science fiction, but like it's, you know, a 9 o'clock political thriller. And I love all of this idea that, you know, government has, well, big business has government in its pocket. You know, there's nice sort of conspiracy theory stuff there that I really like. And I always sort of forget when the man and the ministry is announced, even though I've seen this story. There's two moments in this story that always slightly, surprise me when I watch them. One is that there's this bit with Mike, and it's another bit with Mike later on, where you think you're about to meet another sort of a new major character. That's a good shot, a high angle and the Brigadier coming into it. That Mike is undercover, and I like that use of. I like the attempts to use, because Mike and Benton, who are there so often for just, you know, sort of extra dialogue purposes, or to do fairly humdrum stuff. They don't tend to have an awful lot of agency. I like the fact that they've given Mike his own sort of storyline in this, which is really good. I actually think Mike Yates' development is something that's appreciated in the way that we consider Doctor Who, because he goes through a definite journey that sort of starts here, where he gets the sort of undercover stuff, and then he has this is really nice juxtaposition too between you know, the Pertwee, who's being excellent in the office scenes, sort of saying, you know, you gotta not blow up the mine, and the countdown and the Brigadier and Benton doing it, and an excellent model shot there as well. That's a really effective sequence. So does he say something like it's all rather academic now? Yes, it did. The point is to become academic, it would seem. Yeah, very good. And of course, this is lovely because the Doctor has to sort of chastise Mike without giving away that he knows Mike. But Pertwee, in his look there, is kind of going, "Oh, pal, you've really screwed us up there, mate." You know, there's a nice levels to that that exchange and that interaction and that dynamic. I like that. You'll be received with considerably less courtesy. It's very good. That lovely sort of oh so civilized threat. I like his little badge, his little pin badge as well, which suggests he's a member of some sort of secret order. But yeah, it's good to see Mike. You know, being you know, passing himself off as a member of the ministerial class, and it's nice to have him doing a bit of spying. Boss is interesting. I remember in that John Pertwee special of Doctor Who magazine, I think it said that Boss is tedious, but you know, this is a children's tea time program, and a talking computer that sounds like you know, a sort of Shakespearean actor has called his human minion a little Nietzschean, which I think is rather delightful. You know, only in Doctor Who, and you know, megalomaniac computers are a kind of cliche, aren't they? But they don't appear in Doctor Who that much, to the extent that obviously this one, you know, saying, "Oh, it's I'm the computer" is the cliffhanger, which I think is a slightly odd cliffhanger because we haven't. But this is the incidental music is sort of suggesting, you know, is building to a sort of crescendo there, and I love the way that Stevens sort of responds with a sort of tired tolerance and a slight resignation to the fact that his boss is slightly barking. But because I probably won't be able to talk about it that much when we get to it. Well, actually, I like the fact that the Brigadier is obeying orders and doing as he's told there, but he's also done the thing of going, but I know the Doctor will probably be annoyed with this, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm doing the right thing myself, so I'll send a spy in to keep us ahead whilst also obeying orders. That's a canny use of the Brigadier as well. I love the involvement of Unit in this. They've all got some really dynamics, although the Brigadier did do the saying something silly and getting a withering look from the sensible people, which is an element of his you know, the comicking up of the comedy foil nature of the Brigadier. I do like the not very good cleaner. Jean Burgess, she was called. I like that. I like the creepy crawly green maggots. And we also have. Is this Roger Knott coming here? Roger Knott, who's an actor who's just died, who is I think this is going to be Roger Knott. Yeah, who is the guy who dies, but he's not credited in this. He's the guy who dies by embolism in the Twin Dilemma, and he's also one of the first to cross from Classic Who into New Who, even though it wasn't quite official, because he's a Welsh actor. He was in Attack of the Grask. So, and I only discovered sort of when he died, I think, because I think on the paperwork or on the lists I had, he was credited without the K, Roger Knott, as in, you know, Tyre Knott, double T though. I don't think the K was there on the paperwork I had, so it was only doing a bit of cross referencing, and I think and Ben Jolly helped with it as well, who's a actor spotter extraordinaire, that we worked out that Roger Knott had actually been no, I think Ben put in the query to me saying he thought he might have been, and I then looked into it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. that Roger had not had also been an extra in the Green Death. He's he's a non-speaking actor. I always and of course this is where we lose Elgin, and I loved Elgin in the book, and of course Elgin continues to have a role in the book that he is denied by the illness of Tony Adams. So his character kind of disappears, and it's a shame because he's a good character and we like him, and he's brave enough to stand up to Stevens, and he's the man with the conscience inside, which is good because it would be a bit of a cliche if all the sort of business types were just contextless bad guys. And in fact, I like all the sort of, and Stevens is sort of slightly sympathetic in that sense as well. He sort of thinks he's doing the right thing. Nobody's sort of reveling in their evil apart from Boss, but we'll get to him. But yes, what I was saying about Boss, of course, is that the cliffhanger is he says, "Yes, indeed, Doctor, I am the computer," and you go, but what have we taken it for granted that every big industry has a computer? It's an odd cliffhanger. It strikes a slightly false note of import, I think, because I don't think anybody would be thinking, I wonder what the company's computer is up to, and even also thing representing the voice of Boss, the modulation indicator. I think the program thinks that we're all thinking, and that's obviously a person. Now it's difficult for me because, of course, I've always known that Boss is the computer. But are we supposed to think that Stevens is actually talking to a human boss at the end of the telephone, and that the revelation that it's the computer is a big surprise? I like all this maggots footage, by the way. This is a great episode for. We've had the model maggots on the hill, and this guy here is a different actor who has been tracked down to the States, who's had a very good career. He's got a line in this soldier, but I can't remember his name now, but he doesn't get a credit in this. But yeah, so there's a few people in the ranks of UNIT who get no credit, who've gone on to do things. Thick chitinous plates, which John Pertwee says, Doctor Who says, about the bulletproof nature of the maggot skin, which of course led to an anecdote that Barry Letts put in Doctor Who: A Celebration, which I never quite understood, and it was about because I think it should be pronounced chitinous, and he said that, so therefore he relieved a letter saying, "Dear Barry Letts, the reason I am writing is how to say chitin," or something like that, which seems a rather contextless and rather smart-ass response. I would have preferred a letter that said, "Dear Barry Letts, just to let you know, John Pertwee pronounced chitinous incorrectly." But anyway, in episode 4 of The Green Death. But there we go. Who said that smartassery was introduced with internet exchanges? But yes, that's a famous sort of gaffe, if you like, of John Pertwee saying the word incorrectly. But it's a great episode. Ooh, good cup of tea acting. It's a cup of coffee. Shut up. Who cares? I like the way that Mike sort of enjoys sort of double speaking to the Brigadier. I quite like Mike's sort of cheeky, chappy subversiveness. And there's so actually, chitinous is not the only mistake in this episode, because Yates's guard, Brian Justice, who Michael Bryant clearly thinks is good at guard acting, because he's also the guard that the Master tries to hypnotise at the beginning of the Sea Devils, in part 1 of the Sea Devils. There's only is 2 Doctor Who roles. Don't know anything about Brian Justice. But Yates's guard has a grammatical error in the closing credits. He's YATE', and of course he's not called Captain Yate. So there's some pronunciation and grammatical howlers in this episode of Doctor Who. and of course the milkman comes important. We don't have the scene where he sort of, what does he do to the milkman? Does he persuade him? Does he knock him out? I can't see the surly milkman going, "Yeah, all right, boy, you can have my van." So perhaps he kills. Yeah, Doctor Who has killed the grumpy milkman, Terry Walsh. And so there's quite a lot going on in this episode. So we've got some excellent maggot action with the different props, and I love all that stuff of them shooting the maggots and stuff with the unit soldiers. And then you've got, for that all seems quite sort of grown up Doctor Who-y to me. You've now got John Pertwee dicking about, which is fine. And he was supposed to be the man of a 1,000 voices, wasn't he? He was but they're all quite funny voices, and they're all rather exaggerated and silly. But that's okay. It's interesting for a doctor, for an actor who was very concerned about his sort of elegance and his appearance and looking good, and he's quite a sort of statuesque sort of fellow. He is quite a sort of hammy turn in the way that. He dresses up and plays his different characters and larks about. He loses that sort of sense, that self-importance when he's in a comic guise. It's a very interesting sort of alternative to his usual sort of preoccupations as a performer, where John Pertwee seems to sort of want to look sort of stylish and good when he does the comedy. Even when he's dressed, like the bit with Metebelis 3 when he comes back all torn. It's like when Captain Mannering's sort of fallen under the table and he comes back up and his glasses are skewiff and his hat's dicky. He sort of knows how to sacrifice his dignity for comic effect. Pat Gorman alert. And yeah, he's having a good time doing all of this. And he does good moustache sticking on the fingers acting. Oh, he's good, John Pertwee. Because I forget sometimes that he's a comic, but he was a comic. He was a comic actor. And yet he's probably the most serious Doctor to date, really, because, Hartnell was a bit of a laugh. We forget that. I love, by the way, that Jo's klutziness. I think in the book for this, she doesn't say a frilly cap and apron. She says topless, which is very grown up for a Doctor Who book. And, of course, a prediction of what Katie Manning would get up to not that long afterwards in one of those magazines. But there we go. But I do like... I kind of sympathise with Professor Jones here because, in fact, I had a conversation today with my other half and she was talking to me about something and I just disappeared down a rabbit hole because I was doing something else and I didn't listen to a word she was saying and then had to kind of pretend I had. And I do that quite a lot. I do disappear down rabbit holes and get quite sort of focused on stuff. I like this, the nifty manoeuvre that Mike does, but I really like the way that that Pertwee gets his attention. I think that's really I think this is quite sort of fun. It's slightly silly, but they do it well enough to kind of make it work. That works. That's fine. It's I think Mike's facepull is slightly annoying, but I do like the way he says, I like your handbag. I think that's quite funny. They've clearly got a lovely rapport, these two, and that works. And John Pertwee looks great in a cleaner's outfit. So I think that's all quite fun. Like Joe's coat as well. That's a great shot as well, because you see Benton's face in the mirror. That's a really good shot. Well done, everybody. I think the location stuff on this looks absolutely terrific. This is a really good incident-packed episode that has time for sort of set pieces too, and I love all the location stuff. It makes it feel really sort of real, which means they can get away with the sort of Doctor Who dressed as a cleaner. And I always like a bit of sort of furtive conspiracy. Oh, we're in the lion's den. In disguise, could be found out at any moment. I like the feel of that in a story always, that because there's always a sense of imminent danger to our good guys. I love that. Yeah, so this is them working desperately hard, I think, to try and convince us that the boss is just some guy, maybe even the master or Lupton, if you seeing into the future, because it's the same actor. Yeah, that's a bit silly, but I just don't mind it. But I love the fact that Joe's klutziness is what makes them discover that the mushrooms, the soya, or for one, the corn, is the cure for the Green Death, and that's a nice practical thing. Oh, I think "Gone to Get You a Maggot" has appeared on T-shirts. I think you can get that on somebody's Redbubble. If it's not Clayton Hickman's, it's Stuart Manning's or Andrew Mark Thompson's. One of them. Those guys all do lovely sort of Doctor Who related designs that, if you're a fan, you know what they're a reference to, and if you don't, you're none the wiser. So it's a good way of, it's like the love that dare not speak its name. If you've got a T-shirt with nuts in Sidney Newman's handwriting on, it just looks like a T-shirt that says nuts to most people, but to those in the know, it's a secret code that suggests we are part of some underground movement, and only we understand each other. Yeah, I love all of this stuff. Unit felt very grown up to me as a kid. It's a bit cozier now that I'm an adult, and it's obviously a sort of children's and 1970s, I guess, TV version of what the army is actually like. But actually, if it was too hard-edged and was too brutally militaristic, I don't think we'd have the affection for it that we do. So our familiarity and the fact that we like Yates and Benton and the Brigadier comes at the cost of perhaps some believability and some of the hard edge that I think some of us like about Doctor Who when it's comparatively gritty. But I'm much more forgiving and, in fact, much more indulgent and much more welcoming of anything that is sort of cozy about Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is my comfort blanket. And I think I used to sort of resist that because, again, I had an eye on the general public or the casual viewer. But screw them. There's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. Do you know what I mean? I was talking about this. I've been watching Strictly, which I like, and I cry at the sad bits, and I cheer on the endeavour, and I nearly put on my friend's Facebook, it's a guilty pleasure, and then I thought, actually, sod that. It's not. Why guilty? What? Because somebody else might not approve. Who do I need to approve of what I enjoy? Look, Yates Guard. And they've done, and for Boss's voice, they've done the apostrophe S. So anyway, let's not get into that. So the coziness of Unit, I do sort of accept now. I question sometimes the acting choices of or strength of occasionally of what some of those of both Richard Franklin and John Levine, but when the characters fire on all cylinders or are written for to their strengths, I think they're a great asset. And as I say, I do like the fact that they are ambitious with Mike Yates, who's there to be the sort of, he's been a bit of sort of slightly soppy potential love interest for Joe, but that never quite develops. And he's there to, say, quick, Brigadier, the monsters are invading, what should we do? Or to provide a little bit of sort of muscle or B-plot action or whatever. But the fact that he's given his own agency here, I think is a great development. And in fact, might be, I can't choose the Surly Milkman as my favourite thing, but he gets an acknowledgement here. Ray Handy, the Surly Milkman, good for him. Jones the Milk, I do like him. I like all those scenes with the maggots. I like the sort of long shots of them, sort of rolling down the hill. I really like the sort of closer shots of them crawling up and being shot at and kapow and all of that. That's meat and drink to young Toby watching in front of the fire, wanting a bit of sort of action-packed Doctor Who. But I think I like the fact that they very cleverly incorporated the mushrooms into the plot, so they act as an actual and a metaphorical defeat to the threat. You know, the ecology wins over big business. The mushroom is the cure for the chemical waste that has been produced by the big business, and Mother Earth, nature has the answer, and is the force for good. I think I love the fact that all of that is there, that there's some ambition there to tell the story on more than one level, even though you sort of go, well, isn't it a coincidence that the professor's work is the equal and opposite reaction to global chemicals is. But that's look, we've got giant maggots, we've got Welsh miners turning green. I think you excuse it because it's thematically sound, and it's ideologically ambitious, and it's children's television, pushing the boat out, trying to be imaginative, trying to be forward thinking. Bear in mind, this is however many years ago, and it's something we still as a race haven't quite come to terms with, and is still very much of a hot potato, but was being thought of and put intelligently into storylines by the Doctor Who production team. Well done them. But that's an overarching thing, so I can use that in future episodes. I think the thing for me with this episode is Captain Yates's subterfuge. His Captain Yates as the spy, the espionage, the Mike Yates espionage strand, I think is a good use of a supporting character, who's often unambitiously used. Nice for the actor. As I say, it always slightly surprises me as well, even though I've seen the story gazillions of times. I'm always slightly, and I quite like the fact that he sort of enters and his face is obscured at first, and then it's, oh yeah, it's Mike, and that gives us that lovely exchange with the Doctor, where the Doctor, is sort of telling him off but not be able to acknowledge him. That lovely bit with the Brigadier, where the Brigadier's on the phone but he's got company, so he has to sort of enjoy being slightly, because he's sort of in his position as somebody from the Ministry, he's slightly sort of senior to the Brigadier, so he's posing as somebody that can slightly lord it over the Brigadier, which is rather fun, and he clearly quite enjoys that. And I like the interaction that he has with John Pertwee, and I think there's a clear sort of chemistry and camaraderie there, which means that the bit where he's there with the cleaner, they seem genuinely fond of each other and have a lovely rapport. So I am going to vote for the Mike Yates espionage plot as my thing of episode 4. What is Rueben Herfindahl, my friend, although a friend I've not actually met, but somebody with whom I enjoy communicating and who's been a great supporter of these podcasts from the get-go. What is Rueben going to choose for episode 4 of The Green Death?
I kind of have to go with Cliff Jones. We've never had a companion be married off, which is a trope, happen this well. He really sells it. He comes in. You can see the whole saga of Jo falling in love with him, the whole thing working. Just gotta love it. Brilliant.
Yeah, good choice. I do think Cliff Jones is much better than I expected him to be. I expected him to be the sort of slightly wet, a lot of, and military figures too, a lot of sort of male totty, if you like, in the 70s, who I'd imagine being sort of quite hunky and tough. When I then saw them on the telly, were sort of a bit wet and a bit fey. And Cliff Jones is not. He has the spark. He has the charisma. As I say, I understand that Michael Bryant looked long and hard and couldn't find anyone, and so then it was suggested that Katie Manning's boyfriend be used. And I know Katie and Stuart remained good friends right up until the end of his life, which was relatively recent. Bless him. And I know Katie was extremely fond of him, and he of her. But it's not just the rapport that they have, which I think is great. I think is lovely. He really invests the cat, and he wasn't Welsh, or he's certainly putting on an accent, which I think is, to my ears, is good. and sound, and he has that. He plays the single-minded, slightly tetchy younger younger who actually very, very well. I think he's much better than I certainly, having started to visit old Who that I'd imagined in my head, and frequently it had sort of come up short in the estimations of what my imagination could do with the stories I'd read and conjured on a cinematic level. But some of the characters, as I say, particularly, I thought Mike Yates would be a tough guy. But all those soldiers, I'm thinking of Jimmy Turner as well, Captain Turner, and you go, oh, hello, I'm very poor, because I hadn't sort of thought of class in the military or anything like that, which is very much. Well, it's inherent within the military, but also our depictions of it, in particularly again in shows that deal in types much more, if you like. So the jolly officers are all very sort of jolly, and and I know that Richard Franklin was in the army, but it seems a different sort of army guy to the sort of army guy I'd imagined. I'd imagined Lewis Collins, you know what I mean? I'd imagined those to be the army types. But so anyway, yeah, he is. He's a Cliff Jones is a good choice, but my reservations about Mike Yates aside, I think this is a really, really good use of him, and I think Richard Franklin does it well, and I think it gives the character gets so many more different and fun things to do in that episode than he gets in some whole stories, and I think generally it plays to Richard Franklin's strengths as well. So we chose different things, but I entirely approve of Ruben's choice. I think Professor Jones was great, and I think Stuart Bevan does a really, really good job. And yes, the marrying off of a companion is done very, very effectively in this story. It's a bit of a sort of cliche, isn't it, that the companion meets somebody and falls in love, and in the course of a story, turns their back completely on their life. You'd say people were mad now. You only met him couple of weeks ago, and you're leaving your job. You say you're never going to see half of your friends again. But it's television, and you would really be sort of advised against just get to know him. You could perhaps go and visit him in Wales a few times. Keep your job. We'll give you. We'll extend your leave. No, off. That's because he's going up the Amazon, isn't it? He wants to take Joe up the Amazon, and how can a young lady resist? Anyway, it works. I think it's fed very sensitively into the story, but key to that is Stuart Bevan's performance, that I think Rueben was keen to highlight there, and he's absolutely right. Stuart Bevan's performance at Cliff Jones, I think, is far better than I might have had any right to expect, based on the sort of stuff that we might have been served up in that role. So well done, the late Stuart Bevan. I met him once; he was a nice chap, and I know Katie very, very fond of him, and I love the fact that I feel a bit sad that he wasn't put in the Canine story. That's a typical of an actor's life, isn't it? But he was able to come back for Blu-ray trailers. I know Chris and Chris Chapman made a documentary with the pair of them, which was absolutely lovely. So and I know he was very proud, and I think he considered Cliff Jones to be the best part of his whole career, and yet carried on acting. For all that time, he continued to have a decent career. Did loads of adverts. He had a good sort of everyman dad kind of face. So and had a decent career. He's props up in a Blake 7 as well, doesn't he? And a Blake 7 that I'd actually seen as a kid and not realised that was the guy. Anyway, let's not get into that. Yeah, and he was and he's an important character, even though he's really only a guest character in one 6-part story. His legacy continues on. He's an important character in what he represents in terms of the eco warrior. He's a sort of emblematic of 70s Doctor Who and Barry Letts's preoccupations. He's the character that takes a main character out of the show for good. He also, of course, has that off-screen thing, is that he was Katie Manning's real-life boyfriend as well. And the fact that he does continue to exist in the Whoviverse, even if only in the world of offshoots, because he's in a trailer for a Blu-ray, but such is the madness and magic of Doctor Who that provision is made, creativity is invested, love is poured into what is essentially a plug for a product, but it is turned into a mini adventure that, you know, adheres to canon and even recasts actors after 40 years. And you know what? That brings a tear to my eye. The fact I am not remotely cynical about that. A proper bona fide television writer for Doctor Who and other things. Pete McTighe has execed and created his own series. Writes trailers for Doctor Who that fit into what we know about the show, that use the actors we know and love, that use some actors as well who've, you know, again, were guest actors for a very short amount of time, and then 40 years later get a call going, were you in Doctor, from their agent go, were you in Doctor Who once? They want you to do a thing, you know. And I watch those trailers, and I quite often, you know, I go to the BFI for the launches of the box sets when I can, and they do bring a slight tear to my eye. They warm my heart, and again, I resist much less the coziness and the pleasure and the comfort that Doctor Who gives me these days, because none of those are bad things. It's comfort viewing. It's jeopardy and adventure and craziness and imagination, but it holds me close when it warms my cockles, and it makes me both happy and sad at the same time. And some would say that a happy Doctor Who fan is a very sad person, and that's fine. But you know what? It does me good, and I like it, and I don't care. So hurrah for that. And unlike Mike Yates, my joy, my love of the comfort that Doctor Who gives me is undercover no more. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, because I did. I really did. With no irony, no arched eyebrow. I just like it, and that's all right. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which, as you heard at the beginning, is presented by me, Hadoke the podcaster, with my special guest, Herfindahl, the special guest. And I'm grateful to him and to the many patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Moffat the Patreon, Burns the Patreon, Corey Smith the Patreon, Harness the Patreon, see what I'm doing here, Hayden the Patreon, Leonard the Patreon, Meredith the Patreon, McLean the Patreon, Straw the Patreon, Tate the Patreon, Tedston the Patreon, Arding the Patreon, Bromley the Patreon, Bluebox99 the Patreon, Cook the Patreon, Chalk the Patreon, Davidson the Patreon, Deer the Patreon, Dunford Kelk the Patreon, Dunn the Patreon, Gorman the Patreon, Gallichon the Patreon, and the music is by Gates the Music, and the logo by Patterson the Logo. Well, that was very silly, wasn't it? And if you want your name to be read out, not often with that level of silliness, then you can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month, you can get advance releases, bonus material, and, as I say, mentioned in the podcasts, there's all sorts of other goodies there as well. Plus, you are in advance for Happy Times and Places by about 6 months, at least a month or so in advance of Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic. You get some special insight into some of the stuff that I'm doing that I perhaps won't talk about, certainly not that early in a public forum, and you get other sort of bits and bobs and things as they occur to me. But there's usually 3 or 4 releases a week, as well as pictures of my dog, and it's just a nice place to hang out, I hope. And I answer any questions that you have, and there are monthly AMAs, and I reply to messages, and it's just all cool, sort of nice. That's £3 a month. There are higher tiers, and you get other things as you go up the levels, but most things are available at the lowest tier, which is £3 per month, and you get 10% off, a 10% discount if you sign up for a whole year. But look, if you can't commit to a year or even to a month, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can occasionally sling some cyber change into my cyber pot, although it's not called Busker or Busker.com, is it? It's Ko-fi. So you pretend what you're actually doing is you're not throwing money into pretend. No, it's actual money, but it's cyber money. you know what I mean. It's electronic money into my. I'm not busking. You're buying me a coffee. We're at a cafe together. We're having a chat, but you're buying the coffee. However you choose to interpret the metaphor for giving me money in exchange for whatever all this stuff is, that they make it sound like you're buying me a coffee, which I suppose takes the sting out of the tale. And you can give any amount, any denomination. It doesn't get you any bonuses or anything, but what you are doing is supporting a freelance artist who wants to earn a living for talking out loud and writing things without getting his hands dirty or lifting anything up. And some people want to do that, and I'm very grateful to them. But what costs you nothing, because I know in this day and age, and everything's getting a tighter squeeze. And so I am really, truly grateful to the people of Patreon who've really, been very, very supportive. But you can be supportive in a different way. It doesn't have to be financial. Just listening to this, especially listening this far, is an act of support. But also leaving reviews on iTunes, on Spotify, on Patreon, or just saying nice things on Twitter and on Facebook and all of the social medias, and to your friends, just spreading the word, getting people to listen to these podcasts. That's really helpful too, and very, very much appreciated. And talking of those social media outlets, these podcasts have their own stream. No, it's not a stream, is it? Their own Twitter identity, Hadoke Podcasts, at Hadoke Podcasts. I'm at Toby Hadoke. I'm on Instagram, that I'm trying to get better at, putting videos and pictures and things like that. A lot of it's to do with my comedy night, Excess Malarkey. But I'm on Instagram at toby.hadoke. Excess Malarkey, my comedy club, has its own Twitter feed as well, at Excess Malarkey, and it's just the letter S, Malarkey, and that has its own Instagram feed as well. And I have a page on Facebook too. All of that stuff really just helps if one has an internet presence that people sort of, follow, latch onto, have a look at. And if you like and subscribe these podcasts wherever you get them, that helps tweak the algorithms as well. And there's nothing better in this day and age than a tweaked algorithm. Peter McGowan, that's the name of the guy who was the unit soldier, and I mention it only because he's based in the States now, and he's had a pretty good career. He popped up in, speaking roles and credited roles in Our Friends in the North, and what else? Cardiac Arrest and things like that. But has since moved to the States and is based in the States, and has even been in an episode of How I Met Your Mother. So that's how the Green Death can join, as a degree of separation from Neil Patrick Harris, who then, of course, comes back to Doctor Who as I record this imminently. Not comes back to Doctor Who, comes into the Doctor Who universe for the first time. So it all mingles, yeah. But Peter McGowan is the actor who I remember being a bit cross when I saw the episode, and there was this actor who had a line. He's got a line as a unit soldier, and he didn't get a credit. That sort of thing does make me cross. And it was Ben Jolly, my friend, who managed to identify him, and I think has been in touch with him and has had a little note from Peter McGowan, who has gone on from pointing at a maggot and shooting at a maggot, but his name not in lights, not even green ones, to now being a successful character actor, now based in the States. So good for him. It's a topsy-turvy. So, gosh, his has lasted, because I was not yet born when the Green Death was on. And so he's been doing the business all of my life, and on both sides of the Atlantic. And so it was important for me to just go and check his name, because where, you can be working for nearly 50 years, and even a geek like me has to go, I just need to check the name. And you see, but of those doughty citizens of the small screen are television dreams woven. So I salute you, Peter McGowan, even though I've never met you, and I've not seen you in any of the things in which you've probably flourished and made a good account of yourself. But although I have seen Our Friends in the North, so that's not true. But anyway, I'm trying to be romantic. A doughty artisan of the small screen is Peter McGowan, so he deserves a mention, if nowhere else than on this podcast, because this is where we celebrate the people who made Doctor Who and their all very important parts of the jigsaw.